Brought to you by the Every Dollar app. Start budgeting for free today.
My fiance and I are getting married in a couple of months, and thank you. And my parents just gifted us $20,000, and It's just a gift for future down payments for on a house or just extra support for the wedding.
I got a high five when I got engaged. You got $20,000. That's incredible.
I got a Chinese buffet rehearsal dinner.
Oh, man.
At the Chinese buffet.
Yeah.
Good on you, Timothy.
Thank you so much. And although I'm very grateful for the gift, I'm not sure if I feel comfortable with it just because my parents don't have a really good retirement plan set up for themselves. And so for me, I feel very hesitant. And so for me, I'm not quite sure what to do with it.
Interesting. So you're like, hey, you guys can't afford to give me this $20,000, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And I just feel like it would be better if they held on to it. And, of course, for me, I feel so grateful because they're very generous parents. They always have been their whole lives, and they've been saving up all this money for this moment. But for me, I know that financially they're not really set up well. And so for me, I feel a little burdened by it. And so I'm not quite sure. I've been really wrestling with this.
You're such a good son.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man.
That's wonderful. It's really the exact opposite of selfish.
How certain are you, Timothy? Are you confident or are you guessing as to their financial situation?
Well, I know my dad has been doing the same, embroidery job. He's self-employed, and he's always been, on the lower side of the income. So he's always had lower income. And my mom had to pick up a job taking care of elderly people. And so I know that their financial situation hasn't changed, and they've rented the same house for over 20 years. Like, they still live in the same house that I grew up in. And I know that financially nothing much has changed. And
that could mean they just save a lot.
Yeah, that's it. And so part of me is like, man, I know people like that, and they're like, yeah, I've got $7 million.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm honestly hoping, I'm just waiting for their secret to say, to come out and say, hey, we actually saved up millions of dollars. But I know that that's really not the case. And because I talk about their retirement plan, and it just, they just say, we're going to have to work until we die. And that just seems like the reality of the situation.
Here's a few thoughts. Here's a few thoughts I'm having. Okay. Thought number one is take into cultural context, I think, I'm going to probably get in trouble for saying this on the Ramsey show. I think as a Western culture, we have stripped our culture of all sorts of meaningful signposts, if you will. Like, just pause and celebrate things. We've turned everything into a transaction. And so here's my hesitancy. One time, somebody gave me a gift that I didn't think they could afford. It was a really fancy dinner to celebrate a really cool milestone that we did together. And I tried to be slick, and I secretly paid for it behind their back.
Oh, John.
And I hurt that person. And I'll never forget, and I've never done it since, but she looked at me. It was an advisor of mine. She looked at me and said, this was my gift, and
it blocked the blessing.
Dude, it was my own arrogance. Like, oh, I know your situation better than you do, so don't worry, I'll take care of it. And so that I have a bias there. And so part of me says, if somebody has spent the last 40 years saving nickels and dimes for this moment when you are going to leave and cleave, let them be adults and make adult decisions. The other side is I also know what it's like to be haunted by a gift that somebody really is paying. So part of me says, save that 20 grand, put it in an account, and say thank you so much. Are you going to cash flow this wedding? Or you already have plans? Can y'all do that?
Yeah, my fiance and I are 100% paying for it. We're keeping the budget. We're keeping the budget low of about maybe $17,000.
Okay.
So we're 100% paying for it.
Here's something creative you could do. I'm spitballing. I'm thinking about what John said, both sides of it, because I agree. There's one part where you're like, man, I don't want to block this person's blessing because it's a blessing for them to give it. It's a blessing for you to receive it.
Right.
Then there's what John said, which I also agree with. Sometimes you're like, man, I shouldn't have let them do that, or they shouldn't have done that. And you live with that. What if, I'm going to hybrid this thing, what if you accepted the gift and you're like, I'm going to stash this away, in a high yield savings, or I'm going to stash this away in an index fund. And knowing what you know about their finances on down the line, you're able to regift that back to
20
them.
years. Hey, mom, dad, we got
Plus
you.
interest. And you're like, you know what? You took care of me and you gave me this gift. Now I want to give you this gift back. That's some fence post. What did you call it? Fence post? What did you
just
call it?
signpost. Yeah.
Signpost?
And here's the third option. I'm guessing your parents are the kind of folks that have been working really hard and they wanted you to have good education and they made sure you knew what hard work was and they set you off pretty good. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's 100%.
Okay. I'm imagining my 14-year-old being 25 on the eve of getting married and taking me out for lunch that he paid for and saying, Dad, I want to tell you what you gave me. You gave me character, you gave me this, and you gave me some opportunities. Because of the investment you made over the last 25 years of my life, I actually have saved up, me and my fiance, and we've got enough cash to pay for this wedding. It would really honor us, and I'm using your dad's business. Would you be willing to embroider a gift for all of our attendees to our wedding instead of this $20,000? And what you're doing is you're not saying, Dad, we don't need your help or your love or your blessing. You're saying, because you've been such a blessed, I'm going to get all choked up, shoot. Because you've blessed us for a quarter century, I would love you to bless us in this way. And that way you don't rob your dad of his autonomy and his honor and his dignity, but you say, it would really be a blessing to us to channel it in this way. And he may look at you and say, you're taking this 20 grand, son. And you're like, yes, sir, right? And I'll put in a high yield savings account because we don't need it. But instead of just saying, we don't need you, there's something honor about saying, here's the story. I want you to see the story that you wrote 25 years ago, Dad, and here's what it looks like now. Thank you. And man, if you could not take this, instead of this cash, if you could embroider, use your talents and skills to make something for this wedding, it'd be a gift. And you see how that might be a third option here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's awesome. And I know because they handed it to us just the other day by surprise, and I said, "Hey, can we talk about this first?" And my parents were like, "No, you're taking it right now."
Yeah.
And
so yeah, let the
that was hard.
let the air like, and then come back to, okay, this is a math problem, this is a reality problem, this is an honor, a dignity, and respect problem. And your dad may look at you and say, you're taking this money. And if he does, honor your dad.
Mm-hmm. And they're not, we can tell just by listening, they're not the type of people, because some gifts do come with strings. And it sounds like, just by what you're saying, they're not the type of people that is like, hey, you took this gift and now we get to decide, or now we get a say in XYZ, or we expect now that you will do XYZ. Like they don't sound like those sorts of people, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Because if that was the case, then I'd definitely be like, drop the money and run. Like, just drop it on their doorstep and go. But they're not, it's not that. And so that's, for me, that's always the biggest red flag is, if I take this money, is there going to be something attached to it? But if that's not the case, they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. I love John's ideas. I'm not going to add anything to that.
I'll say one more thing, Timothy. Do not, if you look back and suddenly realize, oh, they've lived in the same rental house for 20 years because they were putting money away from my wedding. Don't let your guilt over this gift impact that blessing that they're trying to give to you. I often feel guilty about, well, I know what this probably... There's something to be said for living open-handed and grateful. Just dropping your shoulders and saying thank you.
And people have different priorities.
That's right. We know we rented so that we could, because we wanted to. Okay, they made grown-up choices for a quarter century for this moment. But sometimes it's just having a father-to-father or parent-to-child conversation over a cup of coffee, saying I love you and I see you. Is this the right move?
Create your free every dollar budget today, the simplest way to budget for your life.